Hello everybody, welcome back to another episode of ILLflips. I'm joined by Brian from ILLstrips. Got a special comic here for you today. It's Saga de Xam by Nicolas Deville and Jean Rollin. This is the 2022 reprint of the original, which is quite rare actually. It's probably comes to about 300 or 400 euros online, so I'm gonna have to do with the reprint for now. It's a very nice reprint though. The original I think was limited to maybe 5,000 copies. Eric Losfeld, the publisher, who also published Pravda, Barbarella, and Jodel, to name a few. I think this is the third publication. He wanted to limit it to a small print run in order to make it a rarer and I suppose a special book. But let's have a look at this book first. It's quite a large size. Like if you look at a normal comic, it's big. It's got this kind of cardboard bound cover, which I kind of like and kind of don't like. I don't know. It's cool. It's unique, but if it got wet or something, I'd be pretty fucked. I suppose you could say that about most books. Cool cover though. Like the pinks and the reds. Like this treatment too. Just the title and then the artist and the writer. So Nicolas Deville, from what I've been reading in the intro here, he had a bit of money and I think his family owned some property in Paris. He worked out of an apartment somewhere in Paris, I can't remember where. It was a big apartment, it was about 200-300 square feet. And it became a bit of a hangout place during the 60s for comic book artists, writers, publishers, you name it. They're all just hanging out, taking LSD, drinking, having parties, but also creating and drawing. Probably a little bit like the underground comics movement in the States, maybe the French equivalent. So the style of this book is in the same vein as the erotic and pop art style of Pravda, Guy Pilart's work, and Barbarella. But I think it's almost, it's kind of almost better. It's a mix of almost, if Bill Sienkiewicz and those guys like Guy Pilart and Jean-Claude Forest teamed up, the artwork is sublime. And it follows this character called Xam. She's from a planet of only women, and I think it's being invaded by this species called the Trogs. They are quite a brutal race of aliens, and she has come back to several different time periods on Earth to, I suppose, figure out how to eliminate these creatures through sex and violence and brutality. So this first chapter, every chapter basically they arrive at a different era in our history. So this looks like, you know, kind of a Prince Valiant type setup. Dungeons, castles, knights, all that kind of shit. I guess she takes on a different appearance for these different eras that she becomes a part of. But from my reading of the intro, it seemed that a lot of really famous artists like Droulet, I don't think Mobius is mentioned, but a lot of the, you know, if you're into bande dessinée, a whole bunch of dudes from that era were hanging out in this guy Nicolas Deville's house. He changed his name from Deville to Deville. And Jean Rollin, I think, helped him with the writing to a certain point, but he then drifted off towards the end for some of the later chapters. There are 3 colorists on board, and so there's a few hands, but it's one man's story really. There's Barbarella. And it's kind of the first French graphic novel. That's what it's being described as in the intro. And Droulet, I think, was very inspired by him. He also did a book, his first album with Eric Losfeld. And he also has a hand on some of these pages. Not a hand in his own hand, but an influence. So this is chapter 2. She seems to be pursued in a Vikings type scenario. I think this may be one of the Trogs. I'm not exactly sure, but it's kind of this big white Chewbacca looking dude. but it has a pop art feel throughout, which is kind of weird for the subject matter, but it really works. Like, even look, check out these like Viking ships, this pink silhouette on the horizon, and it's a real mix of color, big color palette, but it all just kind of works. He doesn't use it everywhere. He still lets a lot of white through, which is nice. And the lettering is quite strange. It changes size throughout the book. Sometimes it's very small. And apparently in the original publication, it came with a little magnifying glass to make it a little easier to read. And I do believe there were some posters that Eric Losfeld used for publication, or publicity, I should say, around the time. Places like Belgium, possibly the US. I don't think the US really took to it. But those posters, I think, came with this. One of them did anyway, when it was first printed, and they're possibly more expensive than the book if they come intact. Or maybe it's if the book comes with the poster. It's about €700 or so. So then we're going way back, 100,000 years ago. And this becomes, this is so cool. Might have to swipe something like that. This is a very limited palette. It's more like, I suppose, the Barbarella style in Jean-Claude Var's book, where he uses a different color per chapter. Check out this frilled neck lizard down here. And the style of drawing also changes. It took him 2 years to make this book, apparently. Over 100 pages. Started in 1965 and published it in 1967. And apparently Eric Losfeld, he was kind of a publisher of, I suppose, kind of surreal literature, like some writers like Kafka and stuff in France at the time, and then he just got interested in comics or bande dessinée. And his input was more just that he wanted them to feel erotic. And I think that could just be down to nudity. I'm not sure if how far he wanted to push that, but this is probably my favorite chapter. This is all about ancient Egypt, and this pop art style, or this color palette, just works really well for this. There is a little bit about the colorists in the beginning of the book. One of these, the original coloring didn't really hold up for this kind of a printing, so they had to redo one of them digitally. Could be this one. It looks a little bit weird. Maybe not though. And his character Zam takes on this kind of Egyptian appearance with this headdress, and she has that there on the cover. But it works really well for these kind of Anubis looking dogs and the pyramids. It's all just really graphic, and the hieroglyphs. I think Nicolas Deville was a big fan of Egyptology, and he was very inspired by, I suppose, just how impressive the Egyptian art was. And you can see that on display here. Yeah, this writing could be tough. I would like to one day hopefully track down the original, and maybe if it came with the microscope glasses, or that'd be kind of cool. This is also a pretty great chapter. This is back in Shanghai, and the color treatment here is just, maybe it's the best actually. He seems to really just be pouring his heart and soul into every panel, every page, and probably having a good time at it. I think he was a fairly quirky fella. He lived in this big apartment with his wife, his 2 children, I think a cat and 2 doves, and he just like drew his comics while a lot of other people came in and out of the house drawing comics, taking LSD, and just having a good old time in the 1960s. This chapter is all black and white. I think this is on her planet, Zamax. It's got more of a Barbarella feel. But it's just really ahead of its time, really, in just terms of layouts. And a huge influence, I think, on everybody who was working around him. Trillier for sure. There's some pages coming up that are very Trillier-esque. This is a pretty cool chapter too. It's quite pop arty. It's made in the USA. I think it's black and white initially, and then I think he becomes a little bit more conscious of political themes and what was going on in the world in these later chapters. Some stuff about the military here. I think, you know, this era, Cambodia had gotten their independence from the French. Or sorry, I should say Vietnam had gotten their independence from the French, but it didn't take too long for the Vietnam War to start. And it would have been at the same time around that these books were coming out. I think he used a lot of models. A lot of the people who came into the house were his models. If you can see here, he's also using some pop culture celebrities. John Lennon. This kind of looks like Pravda a little bit, but they're all referenced. I'm sorry, there was no color in that chapter, just black and white. It's kind of weird for the US, but again, you can see a different style here, and this quite reminds me of Trullier's style. But then it completely changes from page to page. That's really stunning. And later in his career, I think he owned, this is the piece, this is very Trillier. Look at these faces. It almost looks like he might have had a little doodle in there during one of their hangouts. Sorry, as I was saying, he only did 3 other works after this. I'm not sure if they're in this kind of vein. This seems like a very unique project. But I'll have to try and track them down, at least online, and see what they look like. Like, really interesting, just this tiny little circular panel in the middle of this big black page. Messing around with ancient languages or runes. Just a lot of different stuff on display. These are the participants of Saga de Xam. So I guess these are some of his friends, some of his fellow artists, some of the colorists maybe, I'm not sure. The Onk down here, little fertility symbol. And this is the original cover of the first printing from 1967. It's pretty cool. And Humbert and Catherine de Ville, I guess this is his wife. That's the back cover. Here are all his notebooks. It's a nice book. It gives a pretty detailed range of stuff that fill the pages of how he made this come to life. Obviously a guy really interested in history and art, other cultures in the past. Some 1968 illustration. Philip K. Dick book, maybe. Yeah, I don't know, like it's like Gay Pielart and Bill Sienkiewicz mixed together. Just a real range and just style throughout. And then the last page is this pretty amazing spherical drawing with a whole lot of detail inside. It seems like almost the birth of the universe itself. Stunning. Disque de la vie, the disc of life. Okay. So yeah, pretty cool book. Happy with it. I would like to track down the original at some point, maybe do a little comparison if I do manage to get that. As I said, it's a pricey enough book, but you never know. I'll keep a lookout. Thank you for watching. If you would like more of this content, like, follow, subscribe, and check out my own comics at ILLflips.com. Thank you.